Hello there, listeners. It's Susie New from the Australian Society of Anaesthetists, and thank you for listening to our podcast. It's called Australian Anaesthesia, and this is episode 16 of a little series that we have called Talking Money, where we do more than talk money. We discuss the professional, economic and business aspects of running an anaesthetic practice in Australia. We understand you went to med school to learn how to become a doctor, and that learning how to run a business may have been the last thing on your mind. We want to share with you this information so that you can focus on the important task of caring for your patients, knowing that the business aspects are being conducted in a way that is safe and lawful, and for this episode, compliant with Medicare and private health insurers. In this episode, I'm focusing on anaesthesia time units. As you know, the Medicare Benefits Schedule was changed in 2022, and one of those changes was that we, as anaesthetists, have to document our start and finish times. Not surprisingly, this is something that can be audited not only by Medicare, but also by various health insurance companies. ASA members, hopefully you know this already. If not, I encourage you to check your email from the policy team that was sent out on the 14th of February this year. Of course, we understand that there are going to be some circumstances when the anaesthetic time is much, much longer than the operating theatre time. Some examples are if you need to pick your patient up or drop them off in ICU, or if, for whatever reason, your patient has deteriorated or had an unplanned event and you need to stay with them until they have stabilised or they are transported to another hospital. So in this episode, I revisit two earlier podcasts. I go back to 2022 when the changes to the anaesthesia time units were made in the Medicare Benefits Schedule. I've taken an excerpt out of the podcast I made with Dr Mark Sinclair, who at the time was Vice President of the ASA. At the time of recording this episode, he's the current president. And at that time, he just transitioned from the role of Chair of the Economics Advisory Committee. That was episode 52, and it's only available for ASA members on the ASA website. In that episode, we also go through some scenarios of start and finish times for anaesthesia. The other thing is you can't discuss anaesthesia time units without discussing pre-anaesthesia consultations, because hopefully that is what we are doing before we initiate anaesthesia and where we are spending our time when we are not in the theatre actually delivering anaesthesia. There are MBS requirements around those, and I revisit these in a conversation I had with Dr Andrew Mulcahy I, Talking Money episode 11, if you want to know, which again can only be found on the ASA website for ASA members. Dr Andrew Mulcahy is a past president of the ASA and, like Dr Sinclair, a past chair of the Economics Advisory Committee. Again, Dr Mulcahy and I go through a few scenarios. At the end of this episode, I'm going to wrap up with 3 important takeaways, and I'm going to go through 3 more scenarios that you might want to consider. I should add a note here, that is that we at the ASA don't make up the Medicare Benefits Schedule rules or how health funds will interpret them. Sure, we liaise with Medicare and the insurers and try to paint them a picture of work as done, what it looks like on the ground in operating theatres, not work as imagined, but ultimately how anyone's practice might be viewed in future audits, well, we can only speculate. If you're doing what is reasonable, that most of your peers are doing, then it's likely the ASA will have already been in the conversation with those various auditing bodies to point that out. We can't always know how an audit will land, but we will defend good, safe practice. Remember too that the schedule changes, and to take this and all of the Talking Money series as general advice. ASA members, please know that you can always contact the ASA if you have queries about Medicare. Also, keep an eye out on your emails as we do let you know of any upcoming significant changes. All right, enough from me. Let's hear Dr. Mark Sinclair's thoughts on anaesthesia time units. ASA non-members, this is where I leave you. ASA members, I'll meet you again once you've logged into the ASA website. You'll find a link to the full version of this podcast in the podcast show notes, the episode notes. If not, just navigate to the Talking Money page on the ASA website.
This has been Australian Anaesthesia, produced by the Australian Society of Anaesthetists with many thanks to host and editor Dr Susie New, with music by Soda Lime Music, sound and engineering by Bearview, and graphics by the ASA Communications team. For more content, please visit www.asa.org.au.